Good day. I'm Martin Gago with Market Radius Research. We've got CEO Andrew Davidson and VP Biz Dev Dean Newata of Royal Helium joining us today. Royal Helium is an explorer and developer of helium projects in Alberta and Saskatchewan, currently developing the Steveville, Alberta helium project that's expected to go into production in Q2 of 2023 this year. Since we last talked in October, the company has announced over $27 million in funding to develop Steveville and announced a liquefaction partnership and announced exploration plans for its Saskatchewan projects. Andrew and Dean are here to bring us up to speed and take questions from the audience, but please remember, this is neither recommendation nor investment advice. We're here to learn about Royal Helium and what they're all doing there. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. You've clearly been busy. Congrats on the raising significant capital during very challenging times in the capital markets. So to start it off here, why don't you walk us through and give us an update on Steveville?
Sure. Well, thanks, Martin, and thanks everyone for joining and listening to the update. You're right. The markets have been tough for junior resource companies, but we had taken a lot of steps leading into this, Martin, where we were quite confident that we would be able to secure the financing, and we have. The nice thing about it is, while we had to tap the equity markets back in October, we didn't have to do that again. Securing this debt financing with these Canadian senior banks was a pretty big step for companies of our size, and it's not necessarily common. In fact, as far as we can tell, we're the first Schedule A bank financed helium purification facility in Canada. So a pretty big step for us. But we had done a lot of the advanced work, everything from having resource reports done and having offtake agreements in place, to the point where going through the bank's due diligence process was not easy, but not horrendously difficult. We had answers to all the questions. And so I think that was sort of the key to our success there. We have the same issues that we generally have when looking to raise capital, and that's explaining the helium industry to a new audience. But they caught on quickly, and the fact that we can model out what our cash flows will be off of a binding purchase contract certainly helps and gives them a lot of security. We don't have the same level of commodity price risk that a standard oil and gas project would have. No requirement for hedging or anything like that. In fact, no ability to hedge because there's no spot price. So very, very important for us. It takes our plant all the way through to production. Everything that is needed to turn this thing on is now fully paid for. So, or at least we have the capital lined up to fully pay for it.
Andrew, I'm curious, when you were dealing with the banks, I'm guessing you were dealing with their oil and gas teams?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was the banks, it was the Calgary branch that we dealt with. They have an understanding of the whole process, obviously, and how to read the resource reports. Getting up to speed on the helium industry was probably the hardest part. But there's been a fair bit of publicity over helium shortages of late, once again. So those are good data points to provide and really sort of third-party proof to what we're saying. And again, there's no way that we could have gotten these agreements done without having that offtake agreement in place. Otherwise, there's no way to prove the economics of your project. So the fact that we had that was really what secured it for us.
Yeah, and it's always that chicken and egg thing. You got the egg together, and then you could get the chicken going and all that. I'm curious, you initially announced a $20 million, I think, US financing, and then all of a sudden, the bank financing. What happened there?
Sure. Well, we were the $20 million US financing was from a sort of a private equity group out of the UK that we had met with. And they were a very interesting partner, but they firmly operate in sort of the mezz debt space, sort of a secondary lender, and that's their business model. And they offered significant capital for us, enough to get it done. But we had already started down the process with the two banks when we met that group. And so in that agreement we had with them, we had a carve out for these two banks. And once we realized that we were going to get, or it looked very possible that we were going to get that financing from the banks, it made it a very easy switch over from sort of a $20 million facility that paid roughly 19%, including all of the fees, to one that pays 8%. So it was it's a material win for all of our shareholders that we're able to bring this on at the expense of the larger package.
All right, so you're funded, you're in construction right
Yep.
now, and you're gonna start drawing out the helium in a few months, and
Yeah, so it's
purifying
Q2,
and selling it.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's really the next step. The facility is all being built in Nisku, Alberta. It's being built in the shop of RJ Design Solutions. Again, it is under construction. It looks like a facility now, so coming together nicely. At that point, it'll get transported out to site and installed at our sort of well site location, and hookups are made and we turn it on. And we've got 3 helium trailers that we've leased. They will be arriving in March, and that is how we'll be loading the helium out and driving it down to our liquefaction partner in Colorado. So the engineering side of this is done. It's very firmly a construction project right now, Martin. That's where it's at.
And this isn't any sort of new untested technology, is it? Like
No.
it's all pretty meat and potatoes?
Yeah, it's very standard. It's very similar to a standard oil and gas plant. It is the first purpose-built helium plant that RJ has built, but they've built facilities all over the place. So this is not new to them. And of course, everything that was proposed went through our own engineering group at Obsidian Engineering in Calgary, and signed off on. It's actually older technology than some of the more modern membrane plants. And in fact, pretty well every helium liquefier in the world uses the same level of technology. It's a cryogenic plant, so it basically liquefies all of the gases that aren't helium and makes it easy for them to drop out of the stream. And that's how you're able to create a 5.9 level helium purity. It's because at the temperatures we run through the cold box, everything else liquefies and falls out. Helium, of course, having the lowest boiling point of any other molecule, it stays as a gas.
All right, but the actual liquefaction of it happens down with that announced contract down in Colorado.
That's right. That's right. And so you don't necessarily need to liquefy helium to sell it. I mean, we have offers to buy the remaining gas at our plant and they buy it at the wellhead for gas, and it leaves as gas. The client that we have an offtake agreement with requires it as a liquid. So we had to arrange for the logistics and the contract to get it liquefied on their behalf. Our client pays for 100% of that, all the trucking, all of that cost, all the liquefaction cost is their cost. But we've arranged for it. So.
Okay, so those expenses of the liquefaction are not going to run through. Will they run through your financial statements, or is that just
they will run through as an expense and an expense reimbursement?
Okay.
So our agreement is simply that our cost is refunded. We don't profit on the logistics or the liquefaction. That was our agreement with the customer. We'll arrange it. We'll pay for it. You pay us back, and that's what's signed off on. So it comes out to about $100 per MCF all in for transportation and liquefaction.
All right. And are you going to ever get, like you said, people are going to buy it from you, could buy it from you non-liquefied.
Yep.
But do you ever get to the scale where you're big enough where you have your own liquefaction facility, yep, or is that not really, it's sort of customer demand if they need it or not?
No, certainly that's where we want to end up, but it's a matter of building up significant scale of production, and really what dictates where it's going to go eventually for us is which fields are the most productive and most central, right? And there's some competitive tension amongst communities who want to be the home to liquefaction facilities. So we're sorting through that. We think we're a couple of years away from needing to build one, but we keep our eye out on available technology, available plants, just to secure additional space, because it is quite competitive to find liquefaction space right now. Most of the liquefiers in the world are owned by industrial gas companies. In fact, there are 2 in North America that we're aware of that are independently owned, and most of those are still dominated by industrial gas clients. So trying to horn our way into that gas flow stream has been an interesting challenge, but we found a way and we got it done. So,
all right. And when the facility is completed, you've got the wells, you just turn it on and you start producing and you start shipping it and then invoicing the client, and
Yep.
there you go.
Exactly. So it making it sound a lot easier than it is. There is a lot of technology in that plant, but essentially, yes, we open the wells up, gas flows through, we separate the components that aren't helium. They get isolated into separate areas, so CO2 gets separated and liquefied. Nitrogen gets vented, all of the methane or any other Cs are captured and utilized, and you've got helium at the end. Then it flows out the tailpipe of the facility. So,
and you said 3 tanker trucks to bring it down to Colorado and then haul back the empty trucks up there. What frequency will those trucks be going down and back? Like, how long does it take to fill one up?
Yeah, on any one day, there's going to be a trailer probably at Ladder Creek emptying or waiting to be emptied, one on the way back and one getting filled.
Okay.
Yeah. So we chose 3 on purpose. It gives us a little bit of redundancy. There is time lag in there. So, but it works out very nicely. You need to have more than one. Having one means you're shutting your plant down. You need to have more than 2, because if there's any delays at the border or any delays at the plant in Colorado, you really just have to avoid turning your plant on and off. Like, you want it to run at a consistent basis, day in, day out.
Yeah. We're going to get
That's
to...
why, that's why it's 3.
That's why it's 3.
There you
That's
go.
why
We're going to get to exploration. But in Alberta, or do we have additional plans to get new wells going there to increase production and that out of in Steveville?
We've got certainly got plans in Alberta to drill additional wells on different project areas. Those wells will either need a plant of their own, or will replace some of the wells at Steveville should they start to peter out at the end of their useful life. Because our plant is purpose built for the wells that we have at Steveville now. The maximum capacity of that plant is the optimized flow capacity of those 2 wells combined. So most of our exploration, though, is going to be centered back on Saskatchewan, where we have, a few different fields that we've de-risked to a large degree already through various forms of geophysics and drilling. Of course, we've got the 4 wells we've drilled at Climax, 1 at Val Marie, and 2 over at the Ogama project in the southeast. We have been waiting on a different level of permit from the province of Saskatchewan to finish off those Ogama wells. We understand that we have those permits now, so those are ready to go in and be tested. The Val Marie well has not been tested yet. We drilled it in the fall. And we did it this way on purpose. The permit was getting near the end of its life, so we had to drill a well. Turns out we had time to do the right seismic and stuff, so we picked the right location. So we've drilled that well, but we haven't tested it. So those completion programs will run at some point after breakup. So I think May, June of this year, but we're going to get into those. And then we have just launched a aeromag program over our Cadillac project, which is immediately north of Climax, and then a smaller asset of ours up by Swift Current. Both very interesting. One of our competitor companies is drilling a well just outside our boundary at Cadillac to the immediate west. So that's going to be fun to watch. We're not done with that aeromag yet. We've seen pieces of it. It looks interesting, but that's all it is right now. It looks interesting until we're done and we can get it interpreted and tied in with existing trade seismic. We won't know for sure what we're looking at. The Swift Current package is especially interesting to me, because that's really the historical home for helium development in Saskatchewan. The first helium wells and the first helium plants ever built are built right around our lease areas at Swift Current. So what we're looking for there is basically an extension of the historically productive zones with a view to drilling those at some point here in 2023. So that's really the conventional plan. We've got a bunch of project areas that we would like to complete the aeromag, seismic, and drilling on. Again, that's really our template for how we locate where we're going to put wells. Starts with aeromagnetics, comes back with seismic, and then a drill. But the thing that has us most excited, aside from Steveville, obviously, is the Nazare project, which we've talked about at length before. But just an enormous helium bearing zone in southern Saskatchewan. It's actually at the Climax project itself, but it's a separate zone down below traditional helium zones. And we have this slide here, which we put in place to really sort of compare and contrast what a conventional helium project looks like, a very economic one like at Steveville, to what Nazare looks like. And the differences are quite dramatic. When you look at helium initially in place, for example, it's a factor of 10 higher than Steveville. In terms of raw gas flow rates, Steveville, we anticipate 15 million cubic feet a day from 2 wells. Nazare, we're expecting 17 million cubic feet a day from 1 well. Just enormously prolific zones. But there is still a lot of drilling left to go on into that. We have to drill the first horizontal well into that field. We want to do that in 2023. The process to actually drill that well is going to be a long one. The well bore design and the completion design is essentially done. We partnered with the University of Regina on that, and we know how we want to do it. It's just a matter of making sure we pick exactly where we want it done. And we had this slide built just to sort of demonstrate the difference between conventional zones and Nazare. So Dean, if you go back, there it is. The Nazare zone is the ultra thick zone right at the bottom of the screen there, where you see 2 horizontal wellbore legs going out. That's how we're going to drill this well. So it's a horizontal drill with 2 legs, each leg a mile long, and we're going to open them up and test them. And it's going to be a very, very exciting time for Royal and frankly for the helium supply industry in general. So look for that the second half, closer to the end of 2023. But the process of getting it ready, commissioning the drill contract, hiring the rigs, all of that is likely going to start in the next couple of months, because it'll be a long buildup.
So can you just walk us through a bit of like the rough timeline for this year as to what happens when, and when do you start drilling, and just map that out clearly?
Sure. So exploration in Saskatchewan is ongoing now. So that program has commenced already. And that's going to give us targets and locations at both Cadillac and at Swift Current. So that drilling we would expect to start in the 3rd quarter. So think, July or even late 2nd quarter in June. The completions that'll be going on at Valmarie and Ogama, that again is going to be May, June, July timing. So end of Q2, early Q3. And Nazare is going to be starting virtually imminently on designing that program, contracting it, and getting the drilling window lined up. And that's really where it is. And then we've got, the really boring stuff, Martin, like building another facility for the conventional Climax play, which we still intend to do in the second half of 2023. And that's on the 3 wells that we initially drilled back in 2021. So, and that facility will be a carbon copy of the one we built at Steveville, but it will be smaller. They're lower flow wells with higher helium concentration. So smaller plant, less expensive, almost an equivalent amount of helium coming out though. So.
All right, Dean, the slide you were showing before, that is the Nazare project, which is in Climax, but it's not the Climax one itself. Okay.
This one here?
No, where you compared the resource summaries on that.
Yes.
All right. So you would essentially expect to get the sort of traditional or the original Nazare into production by the end of this year?
No, the original Nazare stuff. Well, we have to drill a production well into Nazare. The wells that we've drilled targeting Nazare were essentially wells drilled to test that zone, not as a productive well. So the first well has to go down into Nazare, designed specifically for production from that large zone. The Climax conventional program, and I grant this is a touch confusing from time to time, all happens above it. So Dean, if you go back to the map there you go, the cross section. Right there, that's what a conventional well looks like into Climax. So like the wells that we've already drilled. And you can see the difference between that and a Nazare well right next to it. So
okay. So Nazare conventional, will that be into production by the end of the year or early next year? Or
yeah, if everything goes according to plan, that should be in production end of this year, early next. Again, the facility for that field has already been designed and engineered. It's going to be, it's quite likely going to be RJ again who wins that program. Of course, assuming that the one at Steveville works as build, but we sort of view them as they're different projects all within the same company, but they all follow the same path, Martin, of early exploration up to drilling, prove up a resource, sign a contract for the gas, build the facility, and you're off to the races. So
all right. So one of the key points in the process for Climax conventional is an offtake partnership for that.
Yeah.
All right.
And that'll be, you know, there are discussions going on right now for the remainder of the gas at Steveville. I mean, again, we've only contracted about 50% of that, a little less than 50% of it actually. But in those contracts are built in sort of escalators to work their way into the Climax field as well. So a lot of these groups want access to that field as well as the Steveville one. So, and the nice thing is we've got a basket of customers at the table now wanting to buy helium from us. So when it comes time to specifically contract Climax, it'll be a very short conversation.
Gotcha. Out of Steveville or out of all the projects, is your plan to leave a portion of the production uncontracted so that you can maybe capture some spot market fat margins, presumably?
They would be very fat margins, but it's very difficult to do unless you can liquefy the gas, right? Because you have to have the ability to store if you're gonna be in the spot market, and storing gaseous helium is not a very easy game to play unless you've got storage caverns underground and you're storing massive quantities like they did at the BLM storage cavern. So not until we have liquefaction in place would we be in the spot market game. The way we're structuring the contract, say specifically at Steveville, is we've got our anchor tenant that we've already sold, 45-50% of the gas to. We're marketing the rest of it as a balance of production contract. So we're not guaranteeing a specific amount of molecules. We're guaranteeing everything that isn't going to our existing customer. And mainly because we want that flexibility, because you'd hate to get to a point where we've guaranteed an additional, 60,000 MCF or whatever, and then we end up producing 58 instead of 60. So we need that flexibility.
Gotcha. And when you lock those down, will those be news released over the next few months, I would presume?
Yep, certainly before production starts. I would suspect sooner than that, but yes, I'd say in the next month it'd be a safe bet that there'd be an announcement on who's buying the remainder of the gas. Gotcha. And a few other things that we're working on as well. So the exploration plans will continue to evolve. We'll make news about that. Basically, anytime there's a material update, you'll hear from us.
All right. And in the Saskatchewan projects, you've got a lot going on there. What are you've got planned for the conventional to go into production, let's call it in 12 months or so, and then you'll get new cash flow building on there. Like you're doing a bit of work on a bunch of projects, and you've got the Nazare, which it's a big check to develop that. It's a deep, unconventional well. What's your strategy on the other ones to sort of find target number 3, or like at what point do you sort of hold it off and just say, hey, we've got enough now, let's just develop what we've got?
Well, they sort of run in tandem. So Nazare, when we drill that well, when it works the way we think it will, we'll likely end up having to drill a couple more of those and then building a large scale permanent facility at Climax to handle that volume of gas. Which means we're gonna have the wells drilled. They're going to be sitting there, but it's going to be probably at least a year to build a facility of that size for that. So that we don't expect that to come on until sometime in 2024 or 25. I think is a safe bet. The other projects, because the plants we build for them are modular and smaller in Saskatchewan, we can turn them on and then we could turn them on, say, for the conventional Climax and run them through one of those modular facilities. And then when the Nazare facility is done, simply pipe the gas over to that and move the modular facility to a new project area. So that's really how we're developing it. So that's Climax. Should we discover that we need a facility at Ogama as well, or Val Marie, we'll simply go down that road. We've got a facilities finance partner now built in with these banks. The terms on it are very beneficial, and the paybacks are incredibly short.
Yeah, because on the Nazare, that's what I believe it had there, what, a 30-year lifespan to it. As we know, with discounted cash flows, the last, like after 10 years, you don't really get a lot of value for it since the cash flows are so far down the line. You mentioned maybe drilling a couple other wells on the Nazare. Is that kind of the plan, to sort of pull those cash flows forward so that they're more value to today's investors?
Yes, of course. Yeah, that would be the plan. The nice thing about Nazare is it's so the aerial extent of it is so large that we could drill 3-4 dual leg horizontal wells in a relatively compressed area and produce those for 30 years theoretically, and then simply go and drill 4 more 5 sections over. The zone is very uniform and very consistent across, so at least that's how it appears in all the geophysics.
Yeah, and the drilling the production well in Nazare, can you give us a ballpark? Do you have an estimate of how much you think that's going to cost? And then what, like, you're going to be generating cash flows out of Alberta. Like, are you at self-funding yet, or you need a little more time or to get to that stage? Or with the cash flow, you can maybe take on some operating debt on the cash side of things. How do you like, obviously a lot of things in the air right now, but how do you kind of envision it?
Oh, we envision most of our exploration work, if not all of it, being done out of cash flow. Nazare wells, we have an initial budget that we generated last year, mind you, early last year, of about $8 million to drill that well. It's a big well. So with inflation, maybe it's closer to 9 or 10 at this point. But that's one of the first steps we have to do when we commission that drill is rebudget the entire thing. But our plan is to not really have to tap the market significantly for quite some time, because unless we desire to really escalate things, really advance production and pull molecules forward, things that we have in our pipeline for a year or 2 years down the line, and pull them up now, that would be the only way in which we would go back to equity markets in a material way in the near future. All
right. And just remind the audience here, throw in any questions that you have for management here. You've got Andrew and Dean to answer questions. So great to have the participation here. So in terms of news flow, in the near term, we're gonna get hopefully some offtake partners. Are we gonna get any sort of interim steps towards final sort of the start of production, or is it sometime in April or May or June, or it's like, yep, we're up and running here?
Yeah, absolutely. I would expect that, once we actually break ground at Steveville to start building the buildings that surround the facilities, you'll hear from us then. Again, that's a relatively short process, which we haven't started yet because we don't need to. And then as the various milestones towards completion of the facility, I think are newsworthy events. But beyond that, I mean, there are certain, the exploration side is going to get announced whenever we're doing anything, including the results of them. Between sort of the grassroots exploration we're doing with aeromagnetics and seismic, and the real sort of consequential work that we're doing at Ogama and Val Marie, or will be doing, all provide very valuable data points. That they're incredibly important programs. So the results of all of those will be released. I mean, it's entirely possible we're sitting with 2 new helium fields behind pipe. Or we're sitting with dry holes behind pipe. I don't think it's that, but it's possible. So there's a lot of very impactful work happening over the next few months. Lots of data points. The offtake is probably the biggest near-term one. It will change the economic analysis of our project. Every analyst that's written on us, and most projections that have been put out on Royal's cash flow ability have been done on the same contract price that we've announced, at $450. I anticipate that should change in a material way to the upside when we announce the next offtake agreement. So that's going to be a very interesting data point.
And was the initial one, you think you're saying the next one should be higher? Was that because it's the first client, it's a big client, they had a lot of sort of leverage in the negotiations, say it, and now you're on better footing, so you can arm wrestle a little more margin out of it?
Yeah, that's certainly part of it, but the market itself has changed dramatically during the same time. I mean, we negotiated price with this party. Well, heck, it began almost a year ago, and we announced, I think, in August or September. I forget which at this point. But when we did the deal, it was well above market, above industrial gas market, I should say. Now it's below that. So, but that's the risk you take when you sign long-term contracts. And the fact of the matter is the project is immensely economic at this price, and anything above it is just a bonus.
All right. I have a question here from the audience. Will the horizontal well be complete? Will be a complete new well, or could you re-enter the original wells you used to test the Nazare?
Yeah, the answer to that is we're going to drill a purpose-drilled well. But once that works, we can certainly re-enter Climax number 4 and whipstock off it and drill a horizontal leg.
All right.
So I guess the answer is yes and yes.
All right. We have a question here. Could you please remind us what helium is used for, and what percentage of the North American market are you expecting to meet with each phase of the development?
Okay. Second one's a bit harder to answer, but I'll take a shot at it. The helium market itself is pretty it's pretty broad. The largest single use of it historically has always been healthcare. MRI specifically use liquid helium as a cooling mechanism in the MRI machine to keep the magnets that are spinning from melting. It's irreplaceable in that use, and in fact in most uses. So if there's no helium there, the machines simply don't run. There's a number of other niche industries that are, well, not niche industries, but industries that have used it historically and continue to, all the way down from welding to, leak detection and pipelines, deep sea diving, these kinds of things. But the ones that get us most excited, obviously space exploration is a big one for us. That's the industry that we partnered with initially. Our offtake partner is on that sheet. Very, very interesting and very rapid growth there. I mean, in 2022, there were more launches than there had ever been. 2023 is expected to grow at a very significant rate. So the use there is ongoing, and there's no replacement product in that use, right? In there, it's used both as a cooling mechanism, but principally as a counterbalance and purge gas in the fuel system. So as fuel or propellant is expelled or consumed in the launch process, helium's injected into that to keep the tanks stable, pressurized, and unable to catch fire, because of course helium's completely inert. Other interesting uses for it, obviously, are the high-tech manufacturing. Everything from semiconductors to microchips to fiber optic cables all consume helium in the process. In fact, some of the new microchips actually have helium contained within the chip. So that is a rapidly growing sector, especially in North America, as the US looks to onboard a lot of their semi-manufacturing that had previously been done over in Asia. So those are the principal uses. In terms of what percentage of the market we're going to be, I would suggest we are going to be a very small part of the market initially, but there is clear visibility to becoming a major player. We'll never be the size of Air Liquide or an Air Products of the major industrial gas companies. Frankly, that's a different business than the one we're in. We both just happen to sell helium. But we can easily be one of the largest pure helium producers in North America in a relatively short time frame, because remember, there are very few purpose helium producers. I mean, there's us, like in near-term producers, there's us, North American Helium, a large private company based in New York and Calgary that has lots of production in Saskatchewan already. Desert Mountain down in Arizona is looking to come online here in the next 30 to 60 days. But And then there's a couple of smaller US based companies and a couple of Australian companies that are trying to come on production in the US as well. So it's a small market. The largest producers of helium globally are companies like Exxon, where they produce it in conjunction with natural gas, but it's a pure byproduct for them. They don't target it.
And any just more of an update on the general helium market as it is right now? More greater demand, limited supply, and so that's obviously supply demand is pushing higher prices up. Yeah,
I mean, it's the only change from the last time we spoke, Martin, is to the upside in terms of pricing. The supply demand gap continues to grow. There hasn't been any real major new source of supply that's come online. I would suggest that ours is probably the next to come online. But issues over in Russia, both sanction-wise and operationally, have caused a lot of challenges in the helium market. We spoke about that last time. It's unchanged. There's very little helium coming out of the strategic helium reserve in the US at this point, like little to none. So really it's a massively undersupplied market, which leads to price spikes, which we're seeing now and have seen consistently since 2019. It won't continue forever. Eventually production is going to get close to catching up. That gap will close. But for now, it's a great time to be bringing molecules to market.
Yeah, I just happen to be talking, sorry, Dina, on the satellite side of things, like all those Starlink and those low Earth orbit satellites, they only last up there for a few years, 3-4 years, and they fall down, and you got to send new rockets up, and there are thousands of there. So that isn't, for good or for bad, that's an ongoing use of ongoing demand for rockets and thus helium. Yeah, and on most launches that are carrying light payload like that, or NASA launches, or even launches out of China or wherever. I mean, in general, it's somewhere in the range of is it a million cubic feet per launch that is consumed. So it's a heavy use for sure, and that's just going to grow. And as you get into these larger things, like hearing what SpaceX is planning to do with their, I don't know whether they are Falcon Heavies or whatever they are, that's going to consume a lot of helium gas. All right,
sorry, Martin, I just wanted to just to answer that fella's question. Canada currently represents about a little less than 1% of the global helium market. The province of Saskatchewan,
of production or of demand?
Production.
Of production. Okay.
Yeah. And the government of Saskatchewan has publicly said that they would like to have 10% of the world's production or supply by the year 2030. So in answer to you guys' question, we think that we would represent a large component of that. So it gives you a bit of an idea.
Okay, I have a question here, and we kind of touched on it before, but maybe just to clarify and reiterate this. As a shareholder, when is it anticipated that the company will start producing income?
Yeah, second quarter. I mean, the minute we turn the plant on, the company's producing positive net income. So it's, April or May is really what we're looking at. And it all really depends on making sure there's no additional hiccups in the manufacturing process. As I mentioned before, this has moved from an engineering and exploration program into a construction project. So
all right, I have one question here. Lithium, question mark?
Yeah, we're not talking about lithium at this point. It's, from our perspective, it would be a distraction from these other things that we're doing. It's something that exists. We're certainly aware of it. We've tested it. We've talked about it, what we've found, but we have no intention of developing it anytime soon.
All right. Any timeline on a London listing taking place? How and why if so, why would you think that is that necessary?
Yeah. So as most shareholders know, we went down this process starting, third quarter last year, around the end of it, maybe fourth. When we decided to go down the road, it was there was a couple of reasons for doing it. One, just accessing more markets, getting more shareholders, generating more interest. When Dean and I went over there on sort of a recon trip to see what the market was like, we were frankly shocked at the level of interest over helium projects in the London market specifically, and the level of knowledge that the shareholders or potential shareholders had there. There had been other helium projects roll through that market over the past couple of years, so most were well educated on it. Now, we were initially sourcing it to be a major funding source for the facility itself. So the events of the last 2 months with the banks have really changed the dynamic of what's needed there. We still think it's potentially beneficial a little bit down the line to complete that listing, but the absolute soonest we would do it would be the end of Q1, early Q2, and the size of any listing that we would do there, should we decide to do it, would be materially lower than what we were planning before. Because again, before we were looking to finance this facility with a listing there.
All right. All right, makes sense. After London IPO, do you intend or foresee any other equity raise?
No, not in the near term anyway. Again, as I mentioned before, it depends on the timeline we want to go down. Because we'll be generating some pretty significant cash flows off this facility, we have the flexibility to not raise equity to develop, but it becomes a bit of a trade-off on timing. And while we're in this position of incredibly exaggerated helium prices, it certainly makes sense to contract as much gas as physically possible now.
Yeah.
So to the extent that continues, we are going to want to escalate exploration and production quickly over the next couple of years. So
what?
Long story short, that's a long way around the barn to say we don't have anything planned right now, but we certainly don't rule it out depending on how our development plan works out.
Yeah, you don't need it, but if you want to accelerate things and get to market faster, that's one way of doing it, is getting additional cash to push, to spend more to build stuff out. All right. And I guess on that theme, any uplisting plans to the TSX?
We haven't really talked about that here yet. I mean, the overwhelming majority of our shareholders from the previous 3, maybe 4 raises that we've done have been all institutional. So very, very little retail. In fact, the majority of our retail shareholder base came from the Imperial Helium transaction and the shares that we issued to acquire that company. So there is certainly a different market that you reach into when you go up to the TSX, be it major institutions like Canadian Pension Plan Investment Board, things like that wouldn't generally come down to the venture. But I think we need to have a solid year at least of operating results to justify making such a move, because it's not a cheap venture. I mean, there's a significant ramp up of admin cost and admin procedure that has to follow with that. And until we have a level of comfort that or I guess maybe a visibility to continued repeatable cash flows that we're quite certain about, it doesn't make sense for us.
Yeah, and I've always found institutions make excuse, oh, we can't invest there because it's on the venture. But if they want to invest there, they will. They have the abilities to do that.
Yeah, they
use
can
that
go
as
wherever
an
they
excuse,
want, right? It's
polite to say no.
Yeah,
and
even the Canadian Pension Plan.
Yeah.
Or the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan.
Yeah. What is your current head count, and how much do you expect that to grow over the next 2-3 years?
Yeah, so we're at about 7 or 8 with some of our more senior consultants now. There will certainly be growth as we sort of build out a formal exploration department that can help Shane not work 23 hours a day, which would certainly be beneficial for him. But we don't see enormous growth right now because we operate very focused and very lean, and it's just the way we've always done it, and we're comfortable with it. So a doubling in size over the next 2 years is certainly feasible, but that still just takes us to 18 to 20 employees, not including
so much of Yeah, so much of our work is actually done by consultants and contractors.
Yeah.
So it's not like you have to have a drilling team on the payroll. Like, that's a drilling management team and a field team, and the drillers, they're all contracted. So
once
But
you've
things like
drilled,
facility manager positions are certainly going to be something we have to add. We're
Yeah.
at the end point when it comes to hiring operators for the Steveville plant, so we'll have those jobs filled in the next couple of weeks because they have to be involved, obviously, in the setup of the facility just to learn it and get up to speed. So there'll be growth there on the operational side, but corporately, staffing up in a material fashion is not warranted right now.
so at Steveville, will you have your own, do you contract out the operations of that to like an energy services company? Or are you gonna, you mentioned supervisor staff at least, but you're gonna have Royal Helium employees operating that facility? And about how many people would that take to operate?
Yeah, not many. It's 2 in full scale operation.
Oh.
Yeah, well, which means it's 3 because you're always going to have a redundancy. But they're pretty low maintenance operations. It's very much computerized. Everything from monitoring flow rates to gas analyzers that happen automatically, and it's a pretty amazing facility.
Yeah. All right. You put out a news release a little while back in regards to this. Could you talk a little bit more about the carbon credit strategy and what that could potentially look like?
Sure. So we partner with a group called Guardian Conservation out of Calgary. A very interesting group that is targeting the carbon credit market and working with companies that are doing sort of large scale engineering and production programs. Obviously, they're based in Alberta. They have a heavy focus on energy. They understand what we're doing. But when we started the design for this facility, and this goes back to something we talked about as early as 2018, but we wanted to engineer in a way that we can recover as much of the gas that isn't helium, but is still monetizable as possible. And that produces far less, what you'd call waste gas than other facilities. And there is certainly some benefit to that, both economically in terms of the ability to sell other streams of gas, but also not having to incur the energy cost of re-injecting things back down. And so we save that way. That's one of the ways that we generate credits. The other way is that by going to this cryogenic option versus high compression membrane systems, we save about 1,000 horsepower on plant power requirements. So it looks like we have the ability to actually be a net power generator from our sites as opposed to a power consumer. So those things all generate credits for us. Now, in terms of estimates on what we think they could be worth, of course, that depends on what the market for credits does. But ballpark, we were looking at sort of $3 to $6 million a year in terms of credit value. And that comes obviously from the efficiencies of the plant, but it also comes from, essentially a replacement methodology where people will be buying helium from us from a non-hydrocarbon based gas flow stream, as opposed to buying it from other parts of the world where you're buying a hydrocarbon based gas stream. So there is some potential benefit there on the carbon credit side as a replacement technology. That process, so that it's not going to be something that happens tomorrow. You have to go through and monitor the baseline of what our plant does and compare that to baselines of other similar type facilities to prove that you have saved this level of energy consumption. And that's where the carbon credits lie.
Yeah. All right. Do you foresee a big increase in operation costs as you scale up production and increase well in production? As percentage of revenues in this, a tendency should increase or decrease as you scale up? So,
well, I would say our biggest single cost factor through the, aside from the capital cost of building a facility is the cost to drill wells. And so we're affected there by inflation more than anything else and demand on the oil and gas side. So, drilling wells for us in 2019 or 18 would have been a lot cheaper than it is to drill them now. So that's our biggest sort of cost escalator. In terms of just general admin cost escalators, no big changes. It'll move proportionally, but yeah, other than inflation, I don't see a major escalation in operating costs.
All right. Have you had any interest from large investors to buy sort of a big chunk of Royal Helium?
No, not yet. Certainly we've had reach out from institutions who want to play in a material way, but no formal offer to come and buy a big piece.
All right. Good question here. Are you looking to expand the land package, or are you satisfied with the acreage you've got so far?
Looking to expand on the Alberta side.
Okay.
We've got 1 million acres in Saskatchewan. We've got a lot of work to do there, but there are interesting projects on the Alberta side that we've been having a look at. Nothing that we've acted on yet,
yeah.
But at the end of the day, we'll be a production company, but exploration is the key to growth for us. And so making sure that we're having a good hard look at whatever projects or ground is available is certainly something we'll continue to do. And frankly, it's the part of the business that folks like Shane have the most fun with, is scouting projects and finding hidden gems.
Yeah.
All right. We're always looking.
All right. We are hitting the top of the hour here shortly, so we're going to wrap things up shortly. We addressed this again, but I guess we should maybe hammer this point home. Will Royal Helium manage the construction of the facilities, or will you have an engineering group look after construction?
Engineering group.
Yeah.
It's we are not a construction company, so it'll be. Yeah. The whole process is being run by Obsidian Engineering out of Calgary, and jointly with our John Stiles and myself and our CFO Jeff, going through various bids to manage the construction process. Obviously, RJ did all the design. They're building it, physically building the facility at their shop. But at site, when it comes time to move it out there and put it together, we will be hiring a group to do that work for us. Royal Helium will not be staffing up to do that on our own.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're out of questions here. We're almost into this for an hour, and I there's nothing that jumps out at me that we haven't sort of hit. It's been a pretty wide-ranging conversation. Is there anything you guys want to highlight that investors should maybe keep top of mind, or any points that we haven't made to date before we wrap this up?
Well, I'd say there's really no other company out there on the helium side that has done what we've been able to do. It is at the point that we're at. I mean, we are near cash flow production here within a couple of months on a facility that's purpose built for the wells that we've drilled and the flow that comes out of them and the gas composition that comes out of them. So there's no significant learning curve for our plant and our operations once we have it set up. It has literally been designed to handle exactly what's going to go through it. So that part's done, and I would say that really there's nothing left to do at Steveville other than assemble the plant and turn it on. The financing's done. We quickly move back to exploration upside again. So mainly on the Saskatchewan side with the relatively inexpensive sort of low-hanging fruit work at Ogama and Val-Marie, where we just have to go and open up zones to test gas flows, all the way down to the more grassroots and geophysical work that we're doing now at Cadillac and Swift Current. There are a lot of things on the go in Royal. It is a very exciting time to be a Royal shareholder. Certainly it's exciting for me to be running this with the group that we've assembled here. I think we've done a great job. I look forward to generating cash flows, announcing to the world that, hey, we're producing our first load of helium, left Steveville, it's on its way to Colorado. The first invoice for sales has gone out the door.
All right. And just to reiterate on the news flow, I guess the next items would be, we hope to hear some offtake agreement shortly, and then a few steps until final production out of Steveville, and then maybe a few other exploration updates from Saskatchewan.
Yep, exactly. We'll continue to update the exploration work in Saskatchewan, both the stuff we're doing now and our planning on the completion side at Ogama and Val-Marie. But yes, I think on the most impactful thing you're going to hear from us over the coming period will probably be the next offtake agreement, and then the announcement that yes, we're moving the facility to site now.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to wrap it up here. Thanks a lot, gentlemen. That was informative. You've clearly been busy and getting lots of work done. So all the best, and I'm looking forward to getting updates as you turn the taps on.
Thanks, Martin. I appreciate the time, and thanks everyone for joining. Sorry, one last question I see on there. Has any work started on the Climax facility? The answer is yes. So, but that's it. So now we're done.
Okay, now we're done. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thank you.